Thanks very much, Ian. I hope everybody enjoyed that couple of really engaging presentations there, both of which touched on the importance of analytics in driving improvement. So to continue that theme somewhat, I'm going to describe how our customers leverage eGain analytics in a connected way across channels to drive improvement and enhance their omni-channel customer interactions. I'll start with this quote from last year's Dimension Data benchmarking report. It underlines the importance of analytics, using it to drive decision-making and develop a competitive edge. But it also suggests that many organizations are still flying blind when it comes to using analytics to support decision-making. And I was slightly surprised by that. The idea of gathering data and using it to measure and understand performance is nothing new. In fact, we can look back at some pretty ancient civilizations to see some evidence of this. Now, I recently read an interesting book by a man named Steven Stigler called The 7 Pillars of Statistical Wisdom. This is a book about some of the historical practices and development of statistics throughout the years. These are the kind of books that I read so that you don't have to. But one thing it did contain which grabbed my attention was this reconstruction of a Sumerian tablet from 3000 BC. Now, I wonder if you can tell what this is. I guess the clue is kind of in the theme of my presentation, but it's a table of data. It's a table of data that's basically describing the performance of 2 crops year on year over a 3-year period. So if I actually superimpose the numbers on there, maybe it becomes slightly clearer. So across the top, what it's showing is for each of the 2 crops, what the yearly total was. Underneath that, there's a row with the total for each crop, the total for each year. Below that, you've got the 3 yearly totals for the crops, and at the bottom, an overall total. So it's a report from 3000 BC. And the great thing for the data nerds out there is on the back of the tablet, they've actually got the raw data. So if they'd had Excel in 3000 BC, it would have looked something like this. So the crop that's represented by the thing that looks like a little boat is improving year on year. The crop that's represented by the thing that looks like a kind of headless dancing guy is improving after year 1, but then trending down after a strong second year. So why then, 5,000 years later, are people still struggling with analysis and measuring performance and using data to drive decisions? Well, obviously the tools for analysis have come on a great deal since the days of the stone tablet. But the subjects for analysis have grown much more complex, and the data that surround them has expanded enormously. And that's very true, as I'm sure all of us in this room will realize, when it comes to dealing with omni-channel customer interactions. So the connected customer expects a resolution at the first time of asking. They'd like to be able to self-serve or access help and assistance via their mobile device. They want the right channel, and they want to interact with the businesses they interact with at a time that's convenient and suits them. So the systems for managing customer interaction in the days of omni-channel have kind of risen to that challenge and meet the needs of those type of customers. But the challenge of measuring and managing those has become much more difficult as a result. So here, by way of this kind of slightly clickbaity introduction slide, 5 reasons why I think that is. So the modern customer contact infrastructure is increasingly complex. Customer contact platforms are virtualized, they're geographically dispersed, there's a mixture of in-sourced and outsourced agents in play, and data exists everywhere in multiple different silos. So bringing that together to get a consistent picture of what's happening is very problematic. More channels means more data, and it's complex data. we're not dealing just with call detail records anymore, but structured data, such as those call detail records, and unstructured data, like the contents of chats or interactions with chatbots. And it's one thing to consolidate data and bring it all together in one place, but you've got to get it into the hands of business users in a way that they can easily consume it. So I've spoken to a number of organizations who've invested really heavily in consolidating vast amounts of data, and yet they struggle when it comes to getting it in the hands of business users in a way that can deliver value. And talking about those users, one size doesn't fit all. Different people have to ask different questions of data, and often it's the same data that they have to ask those questions of. So from supervisors and frontline operational people who need fast real-time statistics about what's happening right now, to the analysts who want to do historical root cause analysis and slice and dice data across many different dimensions, to the execs who want to track high-level KPIs over time and check their top line. And of course, we can't forget compliance. I'm sure most of in this room have been involved in one way or another with preparation for the GDPR legislation, which is just the latest piece of personal data regulation to come into force in just a few days' time. But we're all ready, right? So complex infrastructure, masses of data, different users with different needs, and the needs to remain compliant, adds up to a big challenge. But this is something that we've understood for a while at eGain, and addressing those challenges is central to our analytics story. eGain Analytics is comprised of these 4 modules: digital for chat, email, co-browse, virtual assistant; knowledge to understand the use of knowledge and guidance, whether that's in the hands of agents or with customers self-serving of it themselves; operational for voice and IVR, customer interactions; and Journey Analytics, the newest module to the eGain Analytics family, which really joins the whole 3 together and gives both the customer and agent perspective of that journey. And the platform is deliberately designed to allow you to get quick value out of the box. So there's plenty of content that you can start using straight away to get up and running. But once people have gained a little bit of experience with the platform, then pretty soon they want to start to tailor things to their own specific needs. So it's really easy to quickly build reports and powerful dashboards. And beyond that, we've got APIs and developer tools to extend the platform even further, so you can start to incorporate different data platforms and integrate to different systems. So you can think of it as a hub for your omnichannel analytics, collecting data across all those different channels. It takes care of the collection, consolidation, cleansing, and distribution of operational, analytical, and real-time data. So you've got a complete picture across the channels. I talked about those kind of out-of-the-box content. There's a rich set of common business-relevant KPIs along the core focus areas of cost control, revenue growth, effort, and customer satisfaction. Many of those are leveraged in the out-of-the-box reports and dashboards, and the full set, some 2,000 plus, are available to add and drag into your reports as need be. And it's combined with a set of tools to allow people to intervene and change things as well. So that's tools to drive resolution in terms of, you've heard about the knowledge and the guided help capabilities that we have, but also controls to manage resources, such as change agent skill assignments. And it's not just people that we can empower with these tools, but other systems as well. So I mentioned the kind of API capability. So other systems can leverage the power of analytics to drive their decision-making and their operation in an autonomous way. So just going to talk a little bit about how we can operationalize this, how we can use analytics as part of a continuous improvement cycle. So the first step, obviously, is the capture of information across all the channels, both the customer and the advisor perspective. And it's important to align the KPIs that we choose to measure and optimize with the business goals that we have. So for example, if reducing customer effort and improving customer satisfaction is a goal, then FCR is a good metric to pick, for example. But it's important as well that the metrics and the KPIs that are used to measure business outcomes are aligned throughout the organization, top to bottom, because if different people within the organization are using different metrics and different perspectives, then focus on the high-level goals can be lost as you traverse the organization. So having a single version of the truth like this really helps in that case. And we can use the power of analytics to identify opportunities for improvement. So we can decide where we can make improvements, decide where we can have a quick impact, and intervene there. And I'm not talking about making large, sweeping, dramatic changes here. Often, a number of small changes can add up to make a really big difference. And if you were to make a really big change, like, for example, revamp an entire website, something like that, a dramatic change like that is quite hard to measure. It's quite hard to tell what worked and what didn't work. Whereas small, iterative change, you can measure, experiment, test, be agile, and iteratively improve. So the good thing about small, focused changes is they're easy to measure. Once you've made a change or decided to act, then the next thing to do, obviously, is monitor that and see, did it work? So that's the thing that you've done. For example, if the change you've decided to make is intervene with an offer of assistance on a web page to help customers self-serve, is that being used? Is it having the impact that we expect it to have on the metrics we expect it to improve? And is it delivering the value that we expected? And basically, we can get at that point into a virtuous circle of continuous improvement. So I just want to show a couple of examples of analytics in practice, in use. The first example I'm going to use is kind of centers around a first contact resolution improvement initiative. So first contact resolution is quite a compelling metric to focus on. It has a number of benefits. And I've seen a number of customers have success with an iterative approach to doing this, starting by focusing on first and foremost self-service around the web and IVR, before moving on to focus on first contact resolution issues within the contact center itself. So taking the first of those, looking at the web, for example, this is a screen from our journey analytics, which is focusing on the ability for users to self-serve on the web. And this is from a banking example where customers are signing up for a personal loan application. We don't have to show the entire flow here to measure the effectiveness of the self-service. So on the left-hand side, we've got the start of this particular journey. On the right-hand side, the successful completion of the sign-up. And in the middle there, we can see where people are reaching out to the help pages to find additional information. It may be difficult to see from the numbers, but what we can see here is there's a less than optimal number of customers completing the sign-up. And we can see that where people do reach out for additional information, it's not necessarily helping to help them complete their goal. So after we've intervened, say, for example, with a virtual assistant to provide in-place guidance and help and respond to customer inquiries during the cycle, during the flow, we can then measure in a kind of A/B style, the improvement that that's had. And we can see, I can see from here with the volume metrics on the arc here, we're actually seeing after the introduction of the virtual assistant that things are starting to improve. And we can iteratively make changes to that, to kind of measure and drive continual success. The second example I'm using, moving to the IVR now, we can look at where in the voice IVR, customers are having difficulty, where are things failing there. So what this rather colorful report or piece of analysis is showing is basically a stack-ranked list of the most common journeys through voice IVR that contain a particular category of customer events. So what we're focusing on here are basically all the journeys through the IVR that resulted in an agent transfer. So we can see that, for example, the top of the list there is people trying to enter a date to get a statement. Below that, funds transfers. So then we can focus our efforts around the IVR to improve the IVR on the areas that are driving the most dropouts and most failures around self-service. And the third example, so moving into the contact center itself now, we can start to look at, what is the overall FCR success rate there. So a dashboard like this is a good place to get a high-level feeling for that. So on the left, we're looking at what's the overall effectiveness of calls, how many calls are resolved at the first time of asking versus those that take multiple attempts to resolve. The heat map shows me calls that subsequently generated a repeat interaction by wrap code. So what does the agent think was the resolution to the call? And we can start to say, right, well, it's those types of calls that are driving repeat interactions. And conversely, we can also look at what was the initial reason for the call? What drove the call? Which calls are driving the most repeat customer interactions? And then we can start to look at the detail behind this to see specifically where in the contact centers are particular agents, particular teams with particular call types that are driving this type of behavior. And the details behind that, and that's where we can really get into the weeds of this. But then that means we can then focus our attention on whether there's process issues, training issues that can be addressed in order to drive improvement in the overall performance. So that's an FCR example. The final example I'm going to use is how we use analytics during a knowledge implementation to make sure that we're using the best fit of knowledge and deploying it in the right place. So when we're deploying knowledge pretty much early on in a project, one thing we'll consider is which approach is going to work best for particular interaction types. Customers can self-serve knowledge themselves, and we can use guidance for agents, etc. So which one is the best one to use? Once it's deployed, is it being used? Is it being effective? And is it delivering the kinds of impacts and effects that we'd hope and expect that it would? So in terms of choosing the best fit type of knowledge access method for a given type of call, something that we'll typically do there is kind of build up a call profile. So something like this, which you can see from there, the high bars, calls that have lengthy handle times. The lines show transfers and occurrences of hold. So long calls, frequent transfers, frequent holds. Clearly, we're dealing with something that's kind of complex. There's a lot of diagnostic behavior, diagnostic activity going on. This is a good fit for guided help to provide guidance to take the customers through those complex customer interactions and drive up the success rates. Almost the inverse of that, short handle times, very few transfers, very few holds. We're probably dealing with something fairly transactional, fairly simplistic, something that might be a good fit for a virtual assistant or a chatbot to handle, backed with knowledge. And long calls, which otherwise seem straightforward, so the agent's not having to put things on hold while they scrabble around for information. They don't need to transfer. They're fairly easy to handle, but they take a long time. It's probably something that's informational, just the transfer of information to the customer from the agent. So this might be a good candidate for self-service, so accessing that information via search on the web page, for example. And when it comes to where do we kind of put that information so that people can access it, and what's the right place to offer this kind of assistance in terms of targeting knowledge at self-service, one thing that we do is kind of look at where escalations are coming from. For example, across the digital estate, we can take information from a website and say, right, we're interested in people who are heading to contact us, they're escalating, they're trying to get assistance, what's driving them there? So what this shows, it's a bit like the IVR example that StackRank, that the journey's there. What it's showing is what's the most frequent previous event to a visit to contact us. So in this example, it's the payments and statements page. But again, that means that we can kind of focus straight away on where we're going to get the most bang for our buck with providing in-place assistance. Once knowledge is being used, it can be useful to do things like this. So compare, for example, how knowledge is being used and segment the two different types of users. So the same knowledge can be used by both agents and customers in a self-service scenario. Sometimes it's good to have a look at what's going on there. And for example, here we can see that a particular article is heavily biased towards usage by agents. So it might be, for example, that we need to examine our search terms and understand, why is that not being used so heavily by customers? Maybe it's difficult to find. Maybe we need to think differently about how we expose that to customers. And finally, so I'm going to give Noel a cue here, as he was so kind to do that to me. Finally, one of the things we want to look at is, what value are we getting out of it? So we've deployed knowledge. Is it giving us, the kind of return and impacting the KPIs that we would like to? So, if you take the, empowering knowledge agents with Voical's example, is it driving down the amount of transfers as agents become more self-sufficient? Are we seeing holes transferred down? Are we seeing higher FCR? And we can also, if we're capturing, voice of the customer type metrics, whether through surveys or other mechanisms to do that, we can attribute that back to the elements of knowledge that were used, just to understand, how impactful they're being and which are the ones that are working well and which ones aren't so much. So hopefully that's given you a flavor of how we can use analytics to understand what the current picture is, identify opportunities to intervene and act to improve, and kind of monitor both the effectiveness of those interventions and the value that they deliver. So as always, the best place to see this stuff is at the demo stand. So if you haven't checked out the analytics demo stand, please take the opportunity to do so during one of the breaks. And I'd just like to say thank you very much.